fighting the climate crisis by electrifying, getting electrified appliances and the like, heat pumps instead of air conditioning, electric vehicles, and by the incentives we put in place for more renewable energy. Already recognizing that despite the opposition of our state government, we're #1 in wind in Texas, and we're closing fast to become #1 in solar. The potential for jobs, for creativity, for exports from Texas on renewables and on resolving the climate crisis are immense. But our state government and our Republicans at the national level are doing all they can to thwart something that has gone entirely too slow under Democratic administrations and came to a grinding stop and reversal under Trump, and they're trying to do the same thing once again. Third, the barriers to higher education. Over the time since I was in school here and since I was in the state senate, a time when the legislature controlled the tuition, I think since 1980, tuition at public universities has about tripled, and the total cost has gone up far more than that. You know some of the financial barriers that are here. Through the years, I've worked first to be the author of the American Opportunity Tax Credit to supplement Pell Grants, to expand Pell Grants. Currently, I have legislation that's designed to assure that all uses of Pell Grants are tax-free. I have also worked on FAFSA because you almost have to go to college for many people to be able to complete it all, particularly first-time students whose parents may not have a tax return immediately available to help them. Finally, I think the U.S. Department of Education is indicating that they will have revised and simplified FAFSA forms available by December of this year, much too late, but we're going to keep pushing on it. In response, the Republicans in the budget, in the appropriations bill that we will take up next month in Washington, propose to cut student aid, like eliminate work-study programs in our colleges and universities, and basically have a negative attitude about any federal assistance to education. And so the financial barriers are real, and they will get worse under Republican rule. But as you know, not all the barriers to higher education are financial. Some of them in states like Texas and Florida are simply fanatical. And we've seen that in the attacks on diversity, equity, and inclusion in Senate Bill 17 here in the Texas legislature. I've met a couple times with Students for DEI. I applaud the efforts to protect DEI programs. I believe that there's more that the federal government can do in response to reactionary decisions like in Texas. Finally, at a time after a few years that the University of Texas and A&M and other schools began to embrace the concept of diversity, equity, and inclusion, we have people pushing back, trying to limit and restrict the authority to implement those programs in ways that bring a truly diverse campus and assure that all Texans have an opportunity and their families to get a quality higher education, and we've got to push back against that. We did push back, and actually with success in Washington against the attempt by Chip Roy, congressman who comes into Travis County a little bit, to eliminate all diversity, equity, and inclusion rules from the Biden administration on education or anything else. We defeated it in the House a couple months ago by 2 votes, only because 6 Republicans from the North and the Midwest came and joined all the Democrats. Every single Texas Republican member of Congress who was there that day voted to eliminate any kind of DEI by the federal government. So that's the kind of thing we've got to push back against. So there are a host of other issues we can talk about, from women's health care to gun violence to Ukraine, anything you want to discuss. So I just will throw it open for any questions or comments that any of you might have. Who wants to lead off? Yes, sir.
So currently today, the news, immigration is actually many issues, and immigration is very important, but a lot of times I don't see much of a conversation on the citizenship itself and the process of obtaining citizenship. I have a friend from Brazil, and he tries to everything to make it in this country, but because of his visa, he can't get a job study have to pay to go to school. Is there anything you're doing that you would like to do at the national level to help ease the citizenship process?
Well, on an individual basis, we work in our office with many people connected to this university or otherwise who are facing visa problems. Sometimes it's reuniting family. Sometimes it's getting a green card. We're not immigration lawyers, but sometimes we can help individuals. My feeling is that there's no place I go in this community or across America that I don't hear about workforce shortage, be it a restaurant or a high-tech company. Well, the answer is right on our doorstep. We've got many immigrants from all over the world. That's what's made Austin the exciting city it is, that we've gotten the best and brightest from all over the world here. I would say that anybody that comes here and gets a graduate degree or a doctorate, we ought to be offering an opportunity to stay here and invent and create and add to our economy. And we need to incentivize more students coming here. Way back when I was a young state senator, I was fighting international student tuition increases because the legislature actually set them at that time. I think we need more international students in this university to provide it as a true learning experience so that people realize that our worldview has to extend beyond the Red River, that there's a big world out there and we need that kind of understanding. So I would say that the whole cause of immigration, protecting our dreamers, another issue that I've cared a lot about and worked on and offered legislation on. The problem is that under Trump and under Abbott, we have stirred up an incredible amount of anti-immigrant hysteria and false information. And it begins to affect not only those who come without entering through legal channels in the United States, but it affects the many people who want to come here legally. Just recently, I had an inquiry, and we were doing some work on a young man from Kenya who wanted to come here and has kept getting his student visa rejected. I think our immigration system needs to be significantly improved, and accomplishing that right now in this Congress is impossible. We continue to urge the Biden administration to make every change that it can make within its executive authority to try to resolve some of these problems, but we need some legislation to get the job done more completely. Thank you very much. Yes, sir.
Hi, good night, Congressman.
You know, I didn't ask, but would you all mind telling me your name or
I'm Joe. I'm a freshman in business right now, and I've been reading recently that there's been plans by like the Republican, how do you say it? Just like the operations people of the Republican Party that's starting. If Trump were to win again, or like some of the Republicans to win the next election, that they want to basically eliminate the civil service positions in the federal government. What can the legislature do to stop that, prevent it from happening, or just stop it if you guys were to go again in the House?
Yes, I think he wants to be able to hire and fire anyone on a patronage basis in our government, and he wants to eliminate any independent agencies like the Consumer Product Safety Commission or the like that are not under his total control. I really think the most critical thing is to see that Trump is never in office again. He belongs in a public confinement, but not in the White House. Beyond that, if he were in power, the problem is that all the things that he does to erode democracy and take authoritarian control, we're largely dependent on courts that are Republican dominated right now to be the only check on it. And we've been long since given up largely on Republican members of Congress to stand up and push back and put the Constitution ahead of their party. And so I do think if he is elected, the threat to the civil service will be very real, and the remedies we have will be much more narrow than they are right now. Defeating him is the best way to solve that problem. Thank you. Yes, sir, in the back.
Hi, my name's Justin. I'm a journalism and government student.
Hi, Justin.
And I was wondering, we've heard a lot in recent months about kind of headbutting between DPS and APD in different policing approaches. What's your opinion on that whole issue? And then what are you doing to enact criminal justice reform?
Thank you. Very important issue. Immediately after the tragedy with George Floyd, we had the George Floyd Justice in Policing Act. Again, we passed it through a Democratic House, and because the filibuster was still in place, Mitch McConnell was able to block it in the Senate. It did a number of things to try to prevent the injustices that continue to occur. And so I think that's the federal angle is there, that we need to be doing more, and hopefully under a Democratic Congress can pass something like that. But locally, I would not have made the decision that was made to bring in the DPS. And once the decision was made to tell them we did not want them to continue here, of course, Greg Abbott responded by increasing their presence. I think that we need a new police chief who will be coming in, hopefully who will be sensitive to Austin values. And the fact that while we all want to be safe in our apartments and our homes, we also want to ensure that there is justice, that everyone feels safe when they go out on the street, safe from crime and safe from being abused because of the color of their skin.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, ma'am. I would get right behind you and then you'll be next. Sorry.
Hi, I'm Elif. I'm a government major. I'm a freshman. So I'm sure you're aware of this, that guns are, concealed carry at least, is allowed on public university campuses in Texas.
Unbelievable.
It's something of particular importance to me, and I'm aware it's mostly a state issue, but is there anything being done at the federal level or that is planned on being done to hopefully make our campuses safer?
Again, I was one of the people that was involved in forming the gun violence task force in the House, all Democratic. We have passed the assault weapons ban, of which I was a co-sponsor. We've passed universal background checks. There are other things that need to be done there. Each of those blocked in the Senate last time, now blocked in the House. The incredible amount of gun violence that's going on here is just amazing. And the hate that took somebody from Dallas to El Paso to kill Mexican Americans, that took this young man to Jacksonville to kill African Americans. The combination of hate and weapons of war is one that is costing lives that ought not to occur. I do think there is more the Biden administration can do about this, particularly on background checks, that they can define gun owners, gun sellers that are on selling online to have the same requirements that gun stores that sell over the counter currently face. So we wouldn't get full universal background checks, but we would get many more than we do now. And I think that would help. There is a series of similar kind of regulatory changes that work at this problem around the edges. They don't go directly at what the people who suffered such loss in Uvalde had, as they were really abused by the legislature in the way they were treated when they came to Austin. I think some of those measures will help. I've just joined on an appeal with several colleagues that's still being circulated that we will make to the Biden administration saying there's more you can do. We know Congress won't act. We know the Texas legislature won't act. Please do what you can to try to save lives. Yes, sir. Oh, I'm sorry. I said you were next, and then I'll go to you. Yes, sir.
All right, thank you. My name is Shane Yu, and as an international student myself, I first want to thank you for, like you said, you put a lot of effort into fighting against tuition increase for international students. I appreciate that.
Right. What's your home of origin?
Huh?
What's home for you originally? You said you were
We're from China.
From the PRC?
Yes,
Yes, sir.
Okay, so my question is, from my understanding, your congressional district covers much of Austin metropolitan area, which is largely Democratic, so this isn't really a very competitive seat for you. So, given that this is like you have the seat pretty much safely, so does that fact influence any of your stances or actions that you would take? And the other thing is that if I were to become an immigrant citizen, given that I actually hold a lot of socially conservative values, so I'm sorry to say this, I'm more likely to vote for the other party. So what's your message to voters, like potentially like people like me, instead of just your rivals like the Republican politicians?
Well, thank you very much. And the first thing I would say is that our Democratic Party, unlike the Republican Party, needs to be a big tent party. We don't all need to agree on every issue in order to be good Democrats and to want change. I'm glad you mentioned the issue of districting. Because I'm an unwilling expert on gerrymandering. Some of you know this, but I was elected right here in Travis County. In Travis County at a time that it was much less progressive than it is today. And to get rid of me, the Republican state legislators, one day, instead of my representing Pflugerville, I was campaigning in McAllen on the Mexican border. And I once had an office in downtown McAllen. And when that didn't work to get rid of me, I got redistricted to LaGrange and Hallettsville. I went from Eagle Lake to Lakeway in a much different kind of district among small town Republicans. And then the next time, I got redistricted to San Antonio. And so until January of this year, I had more constituents in San Antonio than I did in Austin. So I am finally back in my hometown, the only town I've ever called home. But last year I drew 3 opponents. And while I won the election, and I will be filing again in November for re-election, it's a contest. And Austin is a city with a lot of people interested in politics and a wide range of views. And so I don't think anyone is guaranteed of office. As far as overall conservative views that you refer to, I guess it kind of becomes a matter of a Republican Party that I think no longer fully believes in democracy and has rejected almost all of the core values that it emphasized once. Fiscal responsibility. If you look at when we have fiscal responsibility, it's been under Democratic administrations. Bill Clinton was on a path to eliminate all of our budget deficits, all of our national deficits, so much so that one day I questioned Alan Greenspan in front of the Ways and Means Committee as he was justifying support for a Bush tax cut, and he said we were reducing the debt too quickly. Well, now it's going up immensely because of the huge tax giveaways to the wealthy and the multinational corporations that Republicans and Trump insisted on. International trade, which is a real issue with Asia these days. The Republican Party was once a party that was very big on promoting international trade. Now they have become increasingly kind of an isolationist fortress America. And I particularly, and we can talk about this at greater length, I particularly disagree with the Republican Party leaders, some of whom have been great on Ukraine, including Senator McConnell, but many of whom, the Marjorie Taylor Greens, the Chip Roys, don't believe in supporting Ukraine against Russian war crimes. And I think that's a big difference between us. Overall, I think it's a Democratic Party that believes in diversity, in welcoming people from around the world, thinking that what has made America strong is not all of us being just alike, but that we have been able to draw people from different cultures, from different perspectives, in different countries, to make this the best country in the world. Thank you so much. Yes, sir.
Hi, my name is Simon. I'm studying government. So I was glad you mentioned it, briefly the Republican-controlled courts earlier, because that's what my question's about. As you probably know firsthand, the Trump administration put a lot of extremist judges in pretty much all levels of the federal judiciary. There's a certain one in, I think, Amarillo, Castameric, that recently almost got rid of abortion access for most women nationwide, and only recently got overturned by the slightly less extreme Fifth Circuit. There's also the Supreme Court, which overturned Roe v. Wade recently, scrapped wetland protections for almost half the federal land, and a bunch of other extreme decisions that I'm sure you know about. So what sorts of legislation and policies do you believe that Congress should enact to help rein in the extreme judiciary and the extreme Trump judges?
Well, it's a very good question, and it's one that I think currently we will be plagued for generations by the bad decisions these courts are making. I will say that this problem in Texas is not entirely a Republican problem. The judge that you mentioned in Amarillo, that seat was open for almost a year before President Obama left office. He left that seat and a number of other seats open. President Biden has yet to appoint a single district judge in the state of Texas, and we will soon have 8 openings. They have a tendency, both of them, to favor appointments in blue states and to be a little bit more, less excited about appointing good judges in red states. And that's a source of continued debate that I have and other members of our Texas delegation. I think we are due an improvement in Texas justice, and it ought to be better for us under a Democratic president. And it's really hard now to find a judge with any Democratic history in the federal courts here in Texas. On what we should do about the United States Supreme Court, I think there are a range of possibilities for us to look at. The one that is mentioned most often is expanding the court. As you've heard mentioned, I spent 6 years in black robes on the Texas Supreme Court. I'm a little reticent about that, and the notion that every time a party control changes, we add or subtract numbers from the court. I haven't ruled it out entirely because of the dangers of this court, as with the outrageous Dobbs decision, and that abortion medication proposal will probably go before the U.S. Supreme Court as well. So we may need to do that. But I think there are other things that can be done concerning the court's jurisdiction, concerning the possibility of having limited terms rather than life terms, that might have a significant effect on the court. I'm particularly concerned in addition to the decisions that you mentioned, going all the way back to a decision we won to have the Affordable Care Act, that the reasoning of Chief Justice Roberts on the Commerce Clause now, and with a more conservative court, that almost everything we want to do on climate change, on consumer protection, on environmental protection, on labor conditions, is subject to being outlawed by that court. And the Fifth Circuit, which is also one of the most conservative circuits in the country, recently had just an incredible decision. I joined in an amicus brief in that court. They reasoned on gun safety that because they couldn't find anything going back to about the time of the U.S. Constitution about protective orders that would protect a woman who is the victim of domestic violence from a husband, and a protective order to keep him from having a gun, that a protective order that was issued was invalid based on their analysis that guns and gun restrictions are only related to civil disturbances. And it's that kind of reasoning that we have to be tied to the status of domestic violence relations in the 1700s that these courts are taking us in the wrong direction, and we really, really need change. Thank you for raising it. I'll be looking for other ideas as well. Now, yes. Go ahead.
Yeah, building up with the Supreme Court question, I was wondering if you could discuss more of like thoughts of like the affirmative action. And then, sorry, my name is Philip. I'm a government history major.
Yeah. When the first major affirmative action case, Bakke, was filed a number of years ago, I thought it was a frivolous lawsuit. And I think that this most recent decision is troubling. If you read the concurrence of, I believe, one of the justices, I think it was Clarence Thomas, may have been Alito, they begin to put in question all of our equal employment laws as well. So it is a dangerous decision from a dangerous court. And I think the decision, again, not unlike the attacks on DEI, are designed to undermine the limited progress we've made to opening our society to opportunity for all. And we need to find every way we can around those limitations. Yes, ma'am.
So I'm currently not, I'm an international student, so for your mind.
I'm sorry, you're what?
I'm an international
Oh, great.
student.
Coming from?
Mexico.
Okay.
Yeah,
Campus.
so forgive my ignorance, but, so are there any plans in place in Texas in terms of like climate change policies put on big companies, because we know that big companies are the bigger producers of carbon emissions, etc. Yeah.
Well, there's much that needs to be done. What we did last year was largely carrot and not stick. It was about providing incentives for people to go to cleaner energy and produce cleaner energy. That by itself is not going to get us to achieve the Paris goals. And I saw a report yesterday in the Wall Street Journal that Exxon was saying we're not going to make the 2 degree centigrade goal that most people recognize as being critical. And of course, Exxon is one of the reasons that we're not making it. We need fewer fossil fuels and less fossil thinking. I think one approach that I have been a sponsor of is a carbon tax and dividend plan that puts a tax on carbon and rebates all of the revenue to people, encouraging them to be energy efficient, less carbon dependent. I think that we have a situation in Texas specifically where the oil and gas industry still pretty much dictates everything. And instead of backing renewables and backing electrification, the legislature went exactly the opposite way. Certainly, over the long haul, I think Texas natural gas is better than West Virginia coal, but it's a transition. It's not a solution to the problem. And we've been about the most polluting place in the country and in the world. China has now caught up, and it's putting a tremendous amount of coal online. It's a real problem. We need an international solution, but the place to start is with United States leadership. With Trump pulling out of Paris, with all the resistance that we have up there right now, I really applaud John Kerry and all the work that he's done going to the PRC and trying to begin a dialogue about what we can do on climate. There's so much more we can do in the United States, but we need to provide that leadership worldwide to get other countries to join with us, Mexico included.
Yeah. I think I have time for 2 more questions.
Oh, God. Do you want to call them out? I've got a lot of hands up here. You're up front, come ahead.
All right. Hi, my name is Cole. I'm a government student. I was wondering, specifically in relation to Texas politics, it feels like as a Texas Democrat, we always get kind of close. We move into the zone of like, oh, is Texas a swing state? Is it not? I remember like Beto in 2018, and he runs for governor, and it's not so close. And I was just wondering, as somebody, as you stated, who's been elected multiple times in the state with different kind of demographics of who's electing you, what is some kind of like positivity we can take away as Texas Democrats of us getting more power in the state and trying to, make the state better as opposed to the Republicans?
Well, my feeling is that the reason that Louisiana has a Democratic governor, that Oklahoma has had some Democrats, South Carolina have had some Democrats over the last 15, 20 years, and Texas is not, is that we've got 21 media markets. We've got a small country here. It is a whole nother world, a whole nother country. And it costs so much to run statewide. Beto did that and came up short. We have a lot of people still not voting. I believe we've got to work from the grassroots up. And so, for example, in the current election, there are 38 members of Congress from Texas. There's 1 seat that's genuinely a swing seat, given the way the Republicans have gerrymandered. And that's the district I once represented that starts at the Mexican border in Mission and comes north, except the way it's been gerrymandered now, it doesn't come all the way to Highland Mall as it did when I represented. It stops in Seguin, which is a very Republican area. There's a young woman named Michelle Vallejo. I was talking to her last night, trying to offer her all the support I can. I think that's a seat, though slanted to Trump by 2 or 3 points, is one we might win. In the Texas legislature, I think there is great potential still in the Texas House, but only for maybe 5 seats statewide. It's identifying those seats largely in the Metroplex area, in Houston suburbs, maybe 1 in San Antonio, maybe 1 in Corpus, that getting those seats and concentrating on them would help us build And then there are so many other local offices in county government, city government, these judicial positions that are really important. I think we have to build infrastructure. And then the other area that I'm personally very interested in are our school boards, because these attacks on our schools and our school libraries can do great damage to the, it's obvious there are some deficiencies in public education from some of the officials we have in Texas running the show right now. I think we need to defend our school boards and our school trustees that are under such assault, and certainly not see public money diverted to private elite academies as Governor Abbott wants to do. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Hello, my name is Daniel. I'm an economics major and a sophomore here. So I'm very passionate about public transportation and the myriad benefits it offers for not only providing a cheap and safe way for middle working class Americans to get around cities and rural areas, but also for its environmental benefits due to the fundamental nature of mass transportation versus personal vehicles. I do know that there was some investment in some of the recent major congressional bills that were passed by Congress and Biden.
Right.
But I'm just wondering, do you have any plans, or are you working on, or do you know anyone who's working on any serious plans to not only invest in maintaining existing public transportation infrastructure, but also investing in new infrastructure like high-speed rail and rail for various cities?
Well, we did pass major, what was called the bipartisan infrastructure legislation. Bipartisan is the wrong name for Texas because every single Texas Republican member of the House and the Senate voted against it. Yet it gets about $30 billion to Texas. It's biased in favor of what I've said is the transportation policy in Texas, pavement and concrete and asphalt and grounded corridor, which has basically been transportation policy here. I'm working a lot with Project Connect. Austin has lagged behind Dallas-Fort Worth and even Houston in getting public transportation here. I'm meeting in another week with, 2 weeks I guess, with the leadership of the public transportation entities here in Washington. They finally seem to be on course, but a slow course to get us more public transportation here. I think we need to try to change the bias for highways over everything else and do more on public transportation because it is a key part of fighting the climate crisis. And I know you said we're about there. There were a lot of other hands. I'll try and stay a few minutes after this, and I do invite you to get back with us and send your questions and observations, arguments, or whatever. I'm very fortunate to be able to represent this community and to have finally all of the University of Texas campuses here and out at Pickle in the territory I serve in Travis County. And I want to remain engaged with University Democrats who have done such great work, and I know are going to do good work in this next election.